A scene from Pixar's film Up played in my mind over and over again after reading today's text. A young boy named Russell is in his scouting uniform. He is about 8 or 9 years old, and he makes his way up a few stairs to the porch of an older gentleman's house, the house of Mr. Carl Fredrickson. Russell knocks at the door and, begrudgingly, Mr. Fredrickson opens it. And the scene proceeds in this way. Russell holds up a little book that must have had a short script written inside it and says, "Good afternoon, my name is Russell, and I am a wilderness explorer in Tribe 54, Sweat Lodge 12. Are you in need of any assistance today, sir?" Mr. Fredrickson says, "No." And Russell says, "I could help you cross the street." Mr. Fredrickson says, "No." Russell says, "I could help you cross your yard." Mr. Fredrickson says, "No." Russell says, "I could help you cross your porch." Mr. Fredrickson says, "No." And Russell says, "Well, I gotta help you cross something." Mr. Fredrickson says, "No, I'm doing fine." And then he slams the door shut. He waits a moment thinking that Russell would leave him alone, leave his porch, and then he cracks the door open slightly and sees Russell still standing there, ready again to recite from his script from the very beginning. "Good afternoon, my name is Russell." And Mr. Fredrickson rolls his eyes. At first, this movie came to mind because Russell is a wilderness explorer, and this week's text has a wilderness explorer of its own, Jesus, when he is driven into the wilderness by God's Spirit. Connection, I thought, but that's pretty much where I thought that the connection would end, because Russell is a wilderness explorer, Boy Scout, and Jesus was driven into the wilderness, not necessarily by his own accord. However, the more I thought about the movie and the personality of these characters, the more I thought that it did fit today's text and our start to the Lenten season. The message that I'm sharing with you today is not one where I want to invite you to take on the eager and enthusiastic persona of Russell and trudge straight forward into the wilderness. No, these pandemic days have felt all too much like the wilderness, and we've been in them for longer than 40 days and 40 nights. But maybe that's where we resonate with another character in the movie too, Mr. Fredrickson. Mr. Fredrickson's demeanor is not one of hospitality or excitement. Rather, he is impatient and irritable. Mr. Fredrickson is a widower and is isolated and is generally just sad. There's not much that brings him joy these days. There's not much that he has to look forward to. And I think right now we might identify a bit more closely with Mr. Fredrickson's point of view. We're struggling with our own griefs and losses. We're struggling with loneliness. We're struggling to find the silver lining of anything that happens these days. If someone asks us to do something that is hard or uncomfortable, or even offers a kind gesture, our automatic response might be, "No, I'm fine," and we might want to slam the door shut. Maybe we'd rather not start this Lenten season that often feels solemn and dwells on Jesus' wilderness wanderings. We've been there, we've done that. So our text today is actually fitting that Mark tells this story in a very quick and sort of unemotional type of way. Mark is not eager to spend too much time on Jesus' wilderness wanderings. We don't want to spend any more time in the wilderness, and Mark doesn't share many details of the wandering anyway. In fact, if you blink your eyes while reading this passage, you might just miss the part where Jesus spends 40 days in the wilderness in the company of wild beasts and angels. In a span of just 6 verses, Mark manages to cover 3 huge threshold moments of Jesus' life. Jesus' baptism by John the Baptist, Jesus' stint in the wilderness with temptations from Satan, and also the very beginning, the start of Jesus' ministry in Galilee. Mark seems to stick to the events that occur without adding much fluff. He moves through these events with a sense of urgency, moving quickly from one pivotal experience to the next. We don't get a sense of anyone's emotions as it relates to these events. We are left without many of the details of how or why things are happening in this way. So then we, the interpreters, are left to decipher the details on our own. The one strand that is constant in this passage is the presence of God's Spirit. The same Spirit that descended upon Jesus in his baptism, drove him into the wilderness, and then filled his ministry in Galilee. So what do we do now as maybe the resistant and more grumbling Mr. Fredricksons of our moment? Maybe we can hear Russell's question of, can I help you with anything today? More so as a question of, can I accompany you on one of life's moments today? Can I help you cross this threshold moment so you don't have to cross it alone? As we begin this journey of Lent, we too hear a knock at our door. The knock at our door is an invitation from God's Spirit beckoning us to journey alongside one another and alongside Jesus. The knock at our door is reassurance that we need not move through life's threshold moments alone. So the good news today is not a burdensome invitation into the wilderness of Lent, but rather the good news today is an invitation into journeying with the divine through all of life's moments, the highs and the lows, the losses and the gains, the joys and the sorrows, the baptisms and the funerals, the wilderness and the mountaintop, the beginnings and the endings. So yes, friend, the same Spirit that journeyed with Jesus journeys with us too. And so may we respond to God's knock at the door with an openness to journeying forward with Jesus. Amen.